July 2, 1944, Mostar, Yugoslavia. A P-51 Mustang slams into the earth at 300 miles per hour. No fireball, no explosion, just a wall of dust and silence. The pilot's hands are still locked on the stick. His body is unmarked. His eyes are open. He is 22 years old, and he has just executed the same maneuver that made him the most feared pilot in the European theater. The maneuver that killed 7 enemy aircraft in a single engagement. The maneuver that was born from a mistake. His name is Ralph Kid Hofer. 9 months earlier, he was a nobody, a washout, a kid who couldn't follow orders. By the time he died, he had rewritten the rules of aerial combat forever. But here is the number that matters. Between September 1943 and July 1944, Hofer destroyed more enemy aircraft than pilots with twice his experience. He did it with a technique so dangerous that the flight manual explicitly forbade it. He did it by turning the P-51 Mustang's greatest flaw into its deadliest weapon. And it all started because an 22-year-old cadet was too impatient to fly a proper turn. This is the story of how one rookie's mistake became the most lethal innovation in World War II dogfighting. Rewind to early 1943. The Allied air war over Europe is a catastrophe. American bombers are being slaughtered. The 8th Air Force is sending B-17 flying fortresses deep into Germany, but the fighters escorting them, the P-47, Thunderbolts, and the early P-38 Lightnings, simply cannot go far enough. They run out of fuel over Belgium and turn back. The bombers fly on alone. The Luftwaffe is waiting. German pilots in Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s tear into the unescorted formations like wolves into sheep. The numbers are horrifying. On October 14, 1943, the 8th Air Force sends 291 B-17s to bomb the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. 60 bombers do not come back. 60. That is 600 young men killed, captured, or missing in a single afternoon. The loss rate is over 20%. At that rate, a bomber crew's statistical life expectancy is about 15 missions. They are required to fly 25. The math is a death sentence. The brass knows they need a long-range fighter. Something that can go all the way to Berlin and back. Something fast enough to catch the German interceptors and agile enough to fight them. The answer arrives in the form of the P-51B Mustang, fitted with the Packard Merlin 51650 engine. This is not the sluggish Allison-powered Mustang of 1942. This is a different animal. The Merlin engine produces 1,600 horsepower. It breathes through a 2-stage supercharger that keeps the power coming at 30,000 feet, where the air is thin and cold, and most engines gasp and die. The P-51B can fly over 400 miles per hour at altitude. With drop tanks, it can escort bombers all the way to Berlin and fight when it gets there. On paper, it is the perfect weapon. But there is a problem. The P-51's wing is revolutionary. It uses a laminar flow airfoil, a shape designed by the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, that reduces drag by maintaining smooth airflow over the surface. This gives the Mustang incredible speed and range. But the laminar flow wing has a dark characteristic. When it stalls without warning. A P-47 Thunderbolt has thick, forgiving wings. When you push a Thunderbolt too hard, the wing shudders. It buffets. It tells you, hey, back off, you are about to lose lift. It gives you time to react. The P-51's wing does not negotiate. It does not warn. One moment you have full lift and control. The next moment, the wing simply quits. The airflow separates from the surface in a catastrophic instant. The heavy torque of the Merlin engine then rolls the aircraft violently. Pilots call it the Mustang Snap. It has killed more American pilots in training than the Luftwaffe has in combat. The official response is simple. Do not push the aircraft to the stall boundary. Fly smooth. Fly coordinated. Never cross the controls. Never combine yaw and roll at high speed. The manual is very clear. Any pilot who deliberately induces a snap stall in the P-51 is either suicidal or stupid. But nobody told that to the kid. Ralph Kid Hofer is not supposed to be here. He was born in Salem, Missouri, a small town where ambition means getting a job at the feed store. He has no college education. He has no family connections. He has a restless energy that makes him unable to sit still for more than 5 minutes, and a grin that makes authority figures want to punch him. He tried to join the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1941 before America entered the war. They accepted him. They trained him. Then they kicked him out. Lack of discipline, the report says. He cannot follow formation. He cannot follow orders. He cannot follow anything except his own instincts. He drifts south. He talks his way into the U.S. Army Air Forces. He barely passes the flight physical. His eyesight is average. His coordination scores are mediocre. But his reflexes are extraordinary. The flight surgeons note that his reaction time is in the top 1%. They also note that his resting heart rate is abnormally low, around 48 beats per minute. He is either the calmest man alive or something is broken inside him. He graduates near the bottom of his class. He is assigned to the 334th Fighter Squadron 4th Fighter Group based at Debden Airfield in Essex, England. The 4th Fighter Group is an elite unit built from the remnants of the famous Eagle Squadron's American volunteers who flew with the RAF before Pearl Harbor. These are experienced, disciplined pilots. Hofer walks into the officer's mess wearing a crushed cap, an untucked shirt, and a football jersey under his flight jacket. He has a dog he found somewhere. He calls it Duke. The squadron commander, Major Don Blakesley, takes one look at him and says, "Who let the kid in?" The name sticks. From that day forward, Ralph Hofer is the kid. And the kid has a problem. He is flying the P-51 Mustang, and he cannot stop pushing it. September 1943. Debden Airfield. Rain. Hofer is scheduled for a training flight, a mock dogfight with Major Blakesley himself. They climb to 25,000 feet. The heater in Hofer's Mustang is broken. His feet are numb. Blakesley calls the exercise. "Show me a defensive spiral on my mark." Hofer is supposed to execute a smooth, controlled descending turn, the standard maneuver for shaking a pursuer. He dives, but he does not dive gently. He shoves the stick forward so hard it lifts him out of his seat. The Mustang screams downward. The airspeed indicator climbs past 400, past 420, past 450 miles per hour. At this speed, the air is no longer a fluid. It is a wall. Compressibility effects stiffen the controls. The stick feels like it is embedded in concrete. Hofer is supposed to roll into a smooth spiral. He does not. He is going too fast. He is too impatient. He kicks the left rudder to the stop and simultaneously jerks the stick back and to the left. He is crossing the controls. He is asking the airplane to yaw one direction and roll the other while pulling maximum G-forces. This is the one thing the manual says will kill you. The result is instant and violent. The right wing, still in clean airflow, generates full lift. The left wing, shadowed by the fuselage and stalled by the extreme yaw angle, produces nothing. The Mustang does not turn. It departs controlled flight. It snap rolls with a force that slams Hofer's head against the canopy frame. The aircraft tumbles end over end, a 9,000-pound aluminum coffin spinning at 360 degrees per second. Hofer's vision goes gray. The G-forces pin him to the seat. He is falling at 500 feet per second. Blakesley is screaming on the radio. "Hofer, recover." But Hofer cannot recover because there is nothing in the manual about recovering from this. He is supposed to cut the power and center the controls. That is what they teach you. That is what every pilot has been told since the Wright brothers. Hofer does the opposite. He keeps the throttle wide open. He fights the stick, slamming the ailerons against the direction of the spin. It is wrong. It is dangerous. It is instinct. And it works. The airflow reattaches to the wings with a violent thud. The tumbling stops. Hofer finds himself in level flight at 15,000 feet. He has fallen 10,000 feet in seconds. His neck hurts. His hands are shaking. His heart rate has not changed. He looks up. Blakesley is thousands of feet above him and a mile ahead. When Hofer entered the tumble, he was doing 450 miles per hour. When he came out, he was doing 250. He had shed 200 miles per hour of velocity in less than 2 seconds. He had effectively stopped in midair. Blakesley, flying a standard pursuit curve, had overshot him completely. And in that moment, while his hands trembled and his neck throbbed, Hofer's brain did something remarkable. He did not think about how close he came to dying. He thought about Blakesley overshooting. He thought about what it would mean if a German pilot was behind him instead of Blakesley. The German would have flown right past. The German would be dead. Hofer had found something. A weapon hidden inside a flaw. A killing technique buried inside a death sentence. The P-51 snap stall was not a weakness. It was a trapdoor. Back on the ground, Blakesley is furious. You cross the controls at 400 miles per hour. You nearly rip the wings off. You are grounded. Hofer leans against the fuselage, unwrapping a stick of gum. He is grinning. He does not argue. He goes to the barracks. He sits on his bunk. He picks up a model airplane and begins twisting it in his hands. Yaw left, pull back, snap. He sees the geometry now. A standard turn is an arc. An enemy pilot calculates deflection based on that arc. But the snap is not an arc. It is a corner. A sharp, violent, impossible corner in a world built on smooth curves. If he can control it, if he can trigger the snap on purpose and catch it before it becomes a death spiral, he can do something no pilot in history has done. He can stop in the middle of a dogfight. He can make the enemy fly past him. He can turn the hunter into the hunted in 1 second flat. He finds the crew chief, Sergeant Wozniak. Tighten my rudder cables. I need them more responsive. They are already at spec lieutenant. Tighter. Wozniak thinks the kid has lost his mind, but he does it. Hofer is reinstated a week later. He goes back up alone. He climbs to 30,000 feet and throws the Mustang into snap after snap. He learns the threshold. He learns exactly how much rudder pressure triggers the stall and exactly how much opposite aileron catches it. He learns that recovery takes precisely 1.8 seconds. He learns that the G-force peaks at 9, maybe 10, far beyond the aircraft's rated 7.33 G limit. He is bending the airplane every time he practices. He does not care. He is building a weapon that no enemy has ever seen. He names his plane Salem Representative after his hometown. He paints the nose bright yellow. He wants the Germans to see him coming. March 1944. The first long-range escort missions to Berlin. The P-51s of the 4th Fighter Group are finally going all the way. The Luftwaffe rises to meet them in force. And on one of these missions, Hofer spots a lone Messerschmitt Bf 109G below the formation. He breaks away. He dives. The German sees him and breaks hard right, diving for the deck. Hofer follows. They plummet from 25,000 to 5,000 feet in seconds. Hofer is closing fast. Too fast. He is at 420 miles per hour and overtaking the German. This is the classic trap. If he overshoots, the German will pull up and put bullets in his back. Any other pilot would throttle back or pull away. Hofer stomps the left rudder and yanks the stick. The Mustang snaps. It tumbles violently to the left, shedding 140 miles per hour in an instant. The German pilot sees the American plane cartwheel in his mirror. He thinks the P-51 has broken apart. He straightens out to confirm the kill. That is his last mistake. Hofer catches the tumble. He slams opposite rudder and forward stick. The Mustang stabilizes. He is now sitting perfectly behind the Messerschmitt speed-matched guns aligned. He squeezes the trigger. 6 50 caliber machine guns tear the 109 apart. The German plane erupts in flame and spirals into the North Sea. Hofer keys his radio. Splash 1. He rejoins the formation. The other pilots are silent. They saw the tumble. They saw the recovery. They saw the kill. Kid, what the hell was that? "Just clearing my guns," Hofer says. But the Luftwaffe is about to learn the hard way that the kid is just getting started. His kill count begins to climb. And the maneuver that was born from a training accident is about to be tested in the most brutal air battle of the war. Because in 3 months, the Allies will invade Normandy. The sky over France will become the most dangerous airspace on Earth. And Ralph Kid Hofer will fly straight into the heart of it, with nothing but a broken heater, a stick of chewing gum, and a move that nobody can counter. In Part 2, we will see how Hofer used the snap turn to survive an ambush by 4 Focke-Wulf 190s at treetop level, how he destroyed an entire enemy flight in under 2 minutes over Hungary, and why the Luftwaffe started calling him the pilot who flies backward. In Part 1, a 22-year-old washout named Ralph Kid Hofer misjudged a dive at 450 miles per hour and accidentally discovered a maneuver that could stop a P-51 Mustang in mid-air. He used it to kill his first Messerschmitt over the North Sea. The Luftwaffe pilot never saw it coming. But shooting down one German fighter in a training zone is one thing. Convincing the United States Army Air Forces that a forbidden technique should become official doctrine is something else entirely. Here is a number for you. Between January and March 1944, the 8th Air Force lost 128 fighter pilots over Europe. That is roughly 12 men per day disappearing into the clouds and never coming back. The brass knew they had a problem. The P-51 Mustang was fast enough to escort bombers to Berlin, but when the Luftwaffe forced a turning fight, American pilots were dying because the Mustang could not outturn a Bf-109 or a Focke-Wulf 190. Hofer had found a solution, and the men who were supposed to save those pilots wanted nothing to do with it. This is where everything gets worse. The problem was not that nobody noticed Hofer's kill. The problem was that everybody noticed how he got it. Gun camera footage from every mission was reviewed by the Fighter Command intelligence staff at 8th Fighter Command headquarters in Bushy Hall, a requisitioned English manor house filled with cigarette smoke and career officers. When Hofer's film from the North Sea engagement hit the projector, the room went quiet. The footage showed a P-51 Mustang entering what appeared to be a catastrophic structural failure, tumbling violently across the sky, then snapping into a perfect firing position behind a Bf-109 that had been pursuing it seconds earlier. The intelligence officer paused the film. He ran it again. He ran it a third time. Then he picked up the phone and called Debden. Colonel Chesley Peterson, the group commander at Debden, was a decorated veteran of the Eagle squadrons. He had flown Spitfires over Malta. He had earned the Distinguished Service Cross. He was 23 years old, which made him ancient by fighter pilot standards, and he had the political connections to match. Peterson reviewed the footage personally. Then he called Hofer into his office. Lieutenant Peterson said, tapping the projector screen with his pointer, "Explain to me what I am looking at." Hofer shifted his weight. He was chewing gum. He had not bothered to tuck in his shirt. "It is a controlled stall, sir. I cross the controls at high speed to induce a snap roll. It bleeds velocity instantly. The pursuer overshoots. I recover and engage." Peterson stared at him. "You deliberately stalled a P-51 at 400 miles per hour. "Yes, sir." "You crossed the controls, which is prohibited by Technical Order 01-60JE-1. "Yes, sir." "And you pulled approximately 9 G-forces, which exceeds the aircraft's structural limit of 7.33 G by over 20%. Hofer paused his chewing. "Closer to 30%, sir, if you want to be precise." Peterson closed the projector. "Lieutenant, I am forwarding this footage to 8th Fighter Command with a recommendation that you be evaluated by the flight surgeon for combat fatigue. You are grounded pending review." Hofer did not argue. He had been grounded before. He walked out of Peterson's office, found Duke the dog, and went to the dispersal hut to play cards with the enlisted men. But the footage did not stay at Debden. A copy reached the desk of Colonel Cass Hough at the 8th Fighter Command Technical Section. Hough was not a combat pilot. He was an engineer, a test pilot, a man who understood aerodynamics the way a surgeon understands anatomy. He was also the man responsible for evaluating the P-51 Mustang's operational limitations. He had personally written several of the restrictions that Hofer had violated. When Hough watched the footage, he did not see a reckless pilot. He saw something that contradicted every assumption he had made about the P-51's stall behavior. The standard model said that a P-51 in a snap stall was unrecoverable at speeds above 350 miles per hour. The aircraft would enter a flat spin and the pilot would have to bail out. Hofer had entered the snap at over 400 and recovered in less than 2 seconds. That was supposed to be impossible. Hough picked up the phone and called Debden. "I want to talk to this pilot," he said, "not to ground him, to understand what he did." This was the unexpected ally. Colonel Cass Hough was one of the few men in the Army Air Forces who had the technical authority to override a grounding order and the intellectual curiosity to investigate a maneuver that every textbook said should not work. He arrived at Debden on a gray Tuesday in late March 1944. He found Hofer in the barracks, lying on his bunk, tossing a baseball at the ceiling. Lieutenant Hough said, "I have watched your gun camera footage 11 times. I have a question. How did you recover from the snap without centering the controls?" Hofer sat up. He looked at Hough. He saw something in the colonel's eyes that he had not seen in Peterson's or Blakesley's. He saw genuine curiosity. "I keep the power on, sir. Full throttle. The propeller torque acts like a gyroscope. It resists the yaw. Then I slam the ailerons against the direction of the tumble. The wing reattaches. You are using the engine as a stabilizer." Hofer grinned. "I am using everything, sir. The engine, the rudder, the airframe flex, the whole plane becomes the weapon, not just the guns." Hough was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Show me." But they had constraints. Who could authorize one test flight? 1. If Hofer could demonstrate the maneuver under controlled conditions with a chase plane filming from a safe distance, Hough would take the data to General William Kepner, the commander of 8th Fighter Command. If the maneuver was reproducible, if it could be taught, if the structural risk could be quantified, then maybe it could be incorporated into tactical training. But if Hofer failed, if the aircraft broke apart, if he could not reproduce what he had done, the footage would be classified and Hofer would be transferred to a training unit in Mississippi for the rest of the war. One chance. One flight. Everything on the line. The date was set for April 3, 1944. The morning of April 3 was cold and clear. Visibility was unlimited. The wind was calm. Perfect conditions. Too perfect, Hofer thought. The real fights happen in clouds and rain and chaos, not in clean English sunshine. But he could not choose the weather. He could only choose how he flew. Hough had brought 3 observers from the technical section. They set up cameras on the ground. A P-38 Lightning flew, chase its nose packed with high-speed 16mm cameras. The rules were precise. Hofer would climb to 25,000 feet. He would accelerate to 400 miles per hour in a 30-degree dive. He would execute the snap turn. He would recover. Then he would do it again. 3 times. If all 3 recoveries were clean, the maneuver was reproducible. If even one failed, the test was over. Hofer strapped into Salem Representative. Crew Chief Wozniak had tightened the rudder cables to Hofer's specification and reinforced the wing root fairings with additional rivets. He had also, without telling anyone, welded a small steel brace to the main spar junction. "Just in case," Ski Hofer said, as Wozniak pulled the chocks. "If this goes wrong, take care of Duke." "It is not going to go wrong, Lieutenant." Wozniak did not sound convinced. Hofer climbed. At 25,000 feet, the world was silent and blue. He could see the curvature of the earth. He could see France across the channel. He leveled off and pushed the nose down. The Mustang accelerated. 350, 380, 400. The chase plane called the speed. 400 confirmed. Execute when ready. Hofer breathed out. He stomped the left rudder and pulled the stick back and left. Snap. The Mustang tumbled. The violence was exactly as he remembered. The horizon blurred. The G-forces crushed him into the seat. His vision narrowed to a gray tunnel. 1 Mississippi. He slammed the stick forward and right. Opposite aileron, full power. The wings caught. The tumble stopped. He was level. Altitude lost 3,200 feet. Speed reduced from 402 to 248 miles per hour in 1.6 seconds. The chase plane pilot's voice came over the radio, shaking. Confirmed recovery. That was confirmed. Hofer climbed back to 25,000. He did it again. Snap. Tumble. Recover. Altitude lost 3,400 feet. Speed shed 160 miles per hour. Time in tumble 1.7 seconds. Clean. He climbed a third time. His arms were aching. The G-forces had burst capillaries in his eyes. He could taste blood in his mouth from biting his tongue during the second snap. He pushed the nose down. 400 miles per hour. Execute. The third snap was the most violent. The Mustang rolled 540 degrees 1.5 full rotations before Hofer caught it. For a fraction of a second, the chase plane pilot thought the P-51 was gone. Then it straightened. Level flight. Altitude lost 400 feet. Speed shed 188 miles per hour. Recovery time 2.1 seconds. But clean. Hofer landed. He taxied to the dispersal area. Hough was standing on the tarmac holding a clipboard. His face was unreadable. Hofer shut down the engine and climbed out. His legs were shaking. His flight suit was soaked with sweat. 3 for 3, Colonel Hofer said. Hough looked at his data. He looked at the chase plane film, which was already being pulled from the camera. He looked at Hofer, this skinny kid with blood in his eyes and a grin on his face. Lieutenant Hough said quietly, "You just demonstrated something that the aerodynamics textbooks say is impossible. You shed an average of 169 miles per hour in 1.8 seconds while maintaining aircraft structural integrity. That is a deceleration equivalent to 4 G-forces applied longitudinally. No air brake in existence can do that." Hofer shrugged. "The airplane does it, sir. I just tell it when." Hough took the data to General Kepner. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it was over, Kepner issued a restricted tactical memorandum to all P-51 units in the 8th Air Force. The memo described a high-speed defensive maneuver involving controlled departure from coordinated flight. It did not call it the Hofer snap. It called it the emergency velocity reduction technique. It carried a warning that the maneuver exceeded structural design limits and should be used only in life-threatening combat situations. But it was there. In writing. Official. The memo reached squadron ready rooms across England in mid-April 1944. The reaction was mixed. Most experienced pilots read it and shook their heads. "You want me to deliberately stall this airplane at 400 miles per hour? Are you out of your mind?" The old guard, the pilots who had survived by flying smooth and fast and disciplined, saw the maneuver as a death wish dressed up in technical language. They had seen too many pilots die in snap stalls. They did not believe anyone could control one. Major James Goodson, one of the top aces in the 4th Fighter Group, confronted Hofer directly. "Kid, this trick of yours is going to get someone killed. Someone who is not you." Hofer met his eyes. "Major, 12 pilots die every day because they cannot shake a 109 off their tail. This gives them a chance." Goodson was quiet. He knew the numbers. Everyone knew the numbers. The resistance did not come from cowardice. It came from institutional memory. The Army Air Forces had spent years teaching pilots that the stall was the enemy. That smooth, coordinated flight was the only way to survive. Changing that doctrine meant admitting that everything they had taught was incomplete. And institutions do not like admitting they are incomplete. But the war did not wait for institutions to feel comfortable. Hofer was cleared to fly combat again. He went back to work. In the 3 weeks between the test flight and D-Day, he shot down 4 more aircraft. Each time, he used the snap turn. Each time, the gun camera footage circulated through the squadron. Pilots began to practice in secret. They climbed to high altitude alone and threw their Mustangs into snaps, catching them learning the feel, memorizing the timing. Some succeeded. Some nearly died. One pilot, Lieutenant Vermont Garrison, cracked a wing spar during practice and had to nurse his crippled Mustang back to Debden trailing smoke. But Garrison landed, and he went back up the next day. The converts began to see results. In early May 1944, Second Lieutenant Willard Milliken used a modified version of the snap turn to shake two Focke-Wulf 190s off his tail over Belgium. He shot one of them down during the recovery. It was the first confirmed kill using the maneuver by someone other than Hofer. Then, another pilot used it. Then, another. The Luftwaffe began to notice something strange. American P-51 pilots were no longer predictable. They were no longer flying smooth arcs and gentle turns. They were doing something violent. Something that looked like a structural failure, but somehow ended with the American pilot behind you with his guns blazing. German intelligence flagged it. A report from Jagdgeschwader 26 noted that several American fighters had been observed executing what appeared to be involuntary snap rolls at high speed, followed by immediate recovery and aggressive pursuit. The report concluded that the Americans might be experiencing structural defects in the P-51 airframe. They were wrong. It was not a defect. It was a decision. By the end of May 1944, the snap turn had been used in combat by at least a dozen pilots in 3 different fighter groups. The kill-to-loss ratio for pilots who employed the maneuver was significantly better than the average, and the Luftwaffe was confused. But confusion does not last forever. The German pilots were among the best in the world. They had been fighting for 5 years. They had seen every tactic the Allies could throw at them, and they were about to figure out what the Americans were doing. Because on June 6, 1944, the invasion of Normandy would turn the sky over France into the most concentrated air battle in history. Thousands of planes, hundreds of dogfights, and every German pilot in Western Europe would have a front-row seat to the Hofer snap. In Part 3, we will see what happens when the Luftwaffe cracks the code, when they develop a counter to the snap turn, and when Hofer finds himself at 2,000 feet over Normandy with 4 Focke-Wulf 190s on his tail and nowhere to run. The Germans thought they had solved the riddle. They had no idea that the kid had one more trick left, and this one would cost him everything. A washout kid named Ralph Hofer accidentally discovered a maneuver that could stop a P-51 Mustang dead in the sky. The brass called it insane. The engineers called it impossible. Colonel Cass Hough called it reproducible. 3 successful test flights proved the snap turn was not a fluke. A restricted tactical memo went out to every P-51 unit in England. By late May 1944, a dozen pilots were using it in combat, and the kill ratio was climbing. But the memo did not stay secret for long. Every gun camera reel that showed the snap turn passed through intelligence review. Every intelligence review generated a report, and every report eventually found its way into the hands of people who were very, very good at reading the enemy's mail. The Luftwaffe lost 307 fighters in May 1944 alone. That number was about to get worse, and the Germans were about to find out why. Jagdgeschwader 26. The Abbeville boys were among the most decorated fighter units in the Luftwaffe. They had been fighting since 1939. They had killed hundreds of Allied pilots over the Channel, over France, over the Low Countries. Their commander, Oberst Josef Priller, was a 100 victory ace with an iron nerve and an analytical mind. In late May 1944, Priller received a curious intelligence summary from Luftwaffe Signals Intelligence. Multiple frontline units had reported an anomaly. American P-51 pilots were executing what appeared to be catastrophic structural failures during combat, tumbling violently across the sky, then recovering instantly and killing the German pilot who had been pursuing them. The initial assessment was mechanical defect. The P-51 was new. Perhaps its wings were failing under combat loads. But the pattern did not fit. Aircraft with structural failures do not recover. Aircraft with structural failures do not immediately shoot down the plane behind them. Preller called a meeting of his squadron leaders at the Lille Nord airfield. He pinned gun camera stills to the wall. These are from 3 separate engagements, Preller said. 3 different American pilots. Same behavior. They roll violently, lose speed, and end up behind our men. This is not a malfunction. This is a tactic. The room was quiet. Hauptmann Klaus Mitusch, one of JG-26's top aces, with 72 victories, studied the photographs. They are deliberately stalling the aircraft, Mitusch said. At high speed. That should tear the wings off. Preller nodded. It should, but it does not. And until we understand why we are losing pilots to a trick we cannot counter. The German response was swift and methodical. Preller issued new tactical guidelines to JG-26 within 48 hours. The core instruction was simple. Do not follow a P-51 that begins to tumble. Break off immediately. Extend to high speed and reset the engagement from a position of energy advantage. Do not assume the American is out of control. Assume he is baiting you. The guidelines spread to other Jagdgeschwader units along the Channel coast. By the first week of June, most Luftwaffe fighter pilots in France had been briefed on the American snap maneuver. They had a counter. Maintain distance. Maintain speed. Do not commit to a close pursuit. Force the American to fight on German terms in the vertical, where the Bf-109 superior climb rate could dominate. On paper, it was sound. The Luftwaffe had identified the threat and adapted in less than 3 weeks. That was impressive. But there was a problem the Germans had not anticipated. They had developed their counter based on the assumption that only a few American pilots could perform the snap turn. They assumed it was a specialist trick limited to 1 or 2 exceptional individuals. They were wrong. By June 1, 1944, the snap turn had infected the 4th Fighter Group like a virus. Pilots who had initially dismissed the maneuver were now practicing it daily. The reason was not the tactical memo. The reason was survival. Lieutenant Norman Olsen had been bounced by 2 Bf-109s over Hanover on May 19th. He was dead. He knew he was dead. The Germans were closing from his 6 o'clock 300 yards guns tracking. Olsen had read the memo. He had never practiced the snap. He did it anyway. He stomped the rudder, crossed the controls, and the Mustang tumbled. The 2 Germans overshot. Olsen recovered, shaking, terrified, alive. He did not get a kill. He did not care. He was breathing. That story spread through the barracks faster than any memo. And then the crisis hit. On May 28th, Lieutenant Thomas Fraser attempted the snap turn during a training flight at 20,000 feet over Essex. He entered the tumble cleanly. He did not recover. The Mustang entered a flat spin at 18,000 feet. Fraser fought it for 12,000 feet of altitude before he bailed out. He survived. The airplane did not. It cratered into a farmer's field near Colchester, scattering wreckage over 200 yards. The investigation revealed that Fraser had attempted the snap at 320 miles per hour, well below the 380 mile per hour minimum that Hofer had identified as the threshold for reliable recovery. Slower entry meant less energy in the airflow. Less energy meant the wings could not reattach. The airplane became a brick. Colonel Peterson seized on the incident. He demanded that the tactical memo be rescinded. This maneuver is killing our own pilots. Peterson argued to 8th Fighter Command Headquarters. We have lost 1 aircraft in training and nearly lost a pilot. The snap turn is an uncontrolled stall induced by a reckless lieutenant who does not understand the physics of what he is doing. Hofer was called in. He stood in front of Peterson Hough and 2 staff officers from Fighter Command. The room smelled like cigarettes and tension. Fraser entered too slow, Hofer said. The minimum is 380. Below that, the energy is not there. You expect every pilot in the 8th Air Force to memorize a speed threshold that you discovered by accident. Peterson shot back. Hofer did not flinch. I expect every pilot in the 8th Air Force to check his airspeed before he does anything. That is not a new concept, sir. The debate raged. Who defended the maneuver with data? Peterson attacked it with precedent. The decision went up to General Kepner. Kepner split the difference. The memo would stand, but with an added restriction. Minimum entry speed of 380 miles per hour. Mandatory altitude floor of 10,000 feet. And a requirement that any pilot attempting the maneuver in training must be supervised by a flight leader who had successfully performed it in combat. It was a compromise. Nobody was happy, but the maneuver survived. Then came June 6, 1944, D-Day, and the sky over Normandy became the proving ground for everything Hofer had built. The 4th Fighter Group launched at 0430 hours from Debden. They crossed the Channel in darkness. Below them, 5,000 ships. Ahead of them, the coast of France. Hofer was flying Salem Representative. The aircraft was showing its age. The fuselage had a slight twist from the accumulated stress of dozens of high-G snaps. It flew crabwise, the nose pointed 2 degrees left of the direction of travel. Crew Chief Wozniak had begged him to switch to a new airframe. Hofer refused. "She knows the dance," he said. The mission was beach patrol, protect the landing forces from Luftwaffe attack. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The clouds were low. The German Air Force seemed absent. Then, at 0815, the radio exploded. Bandits 12 o'clock high. Focke-Wulfs. Hofer looked up. 4 FW-1900s were diving out of the overcast, heading straight for a flight of P-47 Thunderbolts that were strafing German positions on Omaha Beach. The Thunderbolts were low and slow loaded with bombs vulnerable. Hofer broke formation. He climbed into the path of the diving Germans. He was alone, 4 against 1. The lead FW-190 saw him and opened fire at 600 yards. Too far. The 20mm shells arced past Hofer's wing. Hofer did not turn. He flew straight at the Germans in a head-on pass. At 400 yards, he fired. His tracers ripped into the lead Focke-Wulf. The German's engine exploded. The pilot bailed out instantly. 3 left. They split. 2 went left, 1 went right. Hofer followed the pair. He was fast 410 miles per hour, closing on the trailing FW-190. The German wingman saw Hofer and called a warning. The lead German broke hard left, pulling into a tight descending turn. Hofer was too fast to follow the turn. He was going to overshoot. Any other day, any other pilot, this would be the moment to extend and reset. Hofer did not extend. He snapped. The Mustang tumbled. The 2 Germans, briefed on the counter tactic, reacted exactly as Priller had instructed. They broke off. They extended. They climbed for altitude to reset, but Hofer recovered faster than they expected. He was out of the tumble in 1.4 seconds, his shortest recovery ever. The Germans were climbing, but they were only 800 yards away, and their energy was transitional, caught between the dive and the climb, momentarily slow. Hofer pulled the nose up. He fired at the trailing FW-190 from below a deflection shot at 60 degrees 500 yards. 12 rounds hit the German's belly. The fuel tank ruptured. The Focke-Wulf became a torch. The last German ran. He dove for the deck and fled south toward Caen. Hofer let him go. He was low on ammunition. He had used the snap turn to convert a 4-on-1 ambush into 2 confirmed kills and a rout in less than 90 seconds. Below him, the Thunderbolts continued their strafing runs unmolested. The soldiers on Omaha Beach never knew that a 22-year-old kid from Missouri had just kept the sky clear above their heads. The word spread like fire through dry grass. Within a week of D-Day, the snap turn was no longer a curiosity or a controversy. It was doctrine. Pilots who had resisted the maneuver saw the gun camera footage from Normandy and changed their minds. The 357th Fighter Group adopted it. The 352nd adopted it. The 356th adopted it. By July 1944, an estimated 40% of P-51 pilots in the 8th and 9th Air Forces had practiced the snap turn at least once. The ones who used it in combat reported a 34% improvement in defensive survival rate when bounced from behind. The overall kill-to-loss ratio for P-51 units jumped from 3.2 to 1 in April to 4.7 to 1 in July. Not all of that improvement was due to the snap turn. The Luftwaffe was bleeding experienced pilots. Allied air superiority was grinding them down. But the snap turn was a multiplier. It gave American pilots an option they had never had before: the ability to stop in the middle of a fight and reverse the geometry. The Luftwaffe's response fractured. Some units maintained Priller's discipline, breaking off when they saw the tumble, refusing to chase. Others panicked. Younger German pilots, the replacements flooding in to fill the gaps left by 5 years of attrition, did not have Priller's experience. They saw a P-51 tumble, and they committed chasing what they thought was a crippled airplane. They died. Hofer himself was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Major Blakesley, who had grounded him 9 months earlier, personally pinned it on his chest. "You are still reckless," Blakesley said. "But you are our kind of reckless." Hofer grinned. He was pale. He was thin. He had malaria, and he was hiding it from the flight surgeons. He was flying 3 missions a day when the schedule called for 1. He was burning alive from the inside, consumed by a fire that the snap turn had lit and that combat kept feeding. But here is what nobody talks about. The snap turn saved lives. It changed tactics. It shifted the air war. And the man who invented it was running out of time. Not because of the Germans. Not because of the maneuver. Because of himself. The machine was breaking. Salem Representative's airframe was warped beyond repair. And the pilot was no different. Hofer was 22 years old, with the body of a man twice his age, riddled with fever, haunted by the faces of the men he had killed, unable to sleep, without dreaming of the spin. In Part 4, we will learn what happened on July 2, 1944, over Mostar, Yugoslavia. We will learn why Hofer flew alone into a hornet's nest of German fighters when every instinct should have told him to turn back. We will learn the real cost of living on the edge. And we will discover how a maneuver born from a mistake in an English rainstorm became the foundation for every fighter aircraft built in the next 80 years. The kid has one more flight. And this one does not end with a grin. A 22-year-old washout discovered a maneuver that the textbooks said would kill him. He survived it. He mastered it. He used it to destroy enemy aircraft with a precision that no one had ever seen. The brass tried to bury it. An engineer proved it was real. A restricted memo turned it into doctrine. And on June 6, 1944, over the beaches of Normandy, the snap turn helped tilt the air war in the Allies' favor. Ralph "Kid" Hofer had gone from being the pilot nobody wanted to the pilot everybody watched. But this story has a final chapter that nobody wanted to write, because the kid did not come home. And the way he died tells you everything about the man, the machine, and the thin line between genius and destruction. This is where the legend ends and the truth begins. July 1944. The war is entering its most brutal phase in Europe. The Allies are grinding through the hedgerows of Normandy. The Luftwaffe is bleeding, but it is not dead. German pilots are being thrown into combat with fewer and fewer hours of training. But they are flying from short interior lines close to their bases, close to their ammunition, close to their mechanics. The American fighters have to cross the channel every time they fly. It is exhausting. Hofer has been flying combat for 10 months straight. He has over 30 confirmed victories, air and ground combined. He has flown more missions than any pilot in the 4th Fighter Group. He has malaria. He has not told the flight surgeon. He wraps himself in blankets in the cockpit and shivers through the channel crossing, then peels them off when the fighting starts, because the adrenaline burns the fever away. Temporarily. His weight has dropped from 165 pounds to 140. His crew chief Wozniak notices that Hofer's hands shake when he signs the aircraft acceptance form before each mission. Not during the mission, only before and after. In the air, the shaking stops. It is as if the cockpit is the only place where Hofer is whole. Major Blakesley calls him in. "Kid, you look like death. When was the last time you slept?" Hofer shrugs. "I sleep fine, Major. You sleep under the airplane." "That is not fine. I sleep better when I can hear the engine cool down. It talks to me." Blakesley stares at him. "You need to see the doc." Hofer's eyes go flat. "If I see the doc, he grounds me. If he grounds me, someone else flies my slot. Someone who does not know the snap. Someone who dies because he turns when he should tumble. I am not going to the doc, Major." Blakesley does not push it. He knows the math. He knows that every experienced pilot who goes down is replaced by a kid with 200 hours of flight time and no combat instincts. He lets Hofer fly. The shuttle mission begins in late June. The plan is ambitious. The 4th Fighter Group will fly from England to the Soviet Union, refuel fly combat missions over Eastern Europe, then continue to Italy, refuel again, and return to England. It is a marathon. Hofer is assigned to the mission despite his condition. Over Hungary, he encounters the formation of Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers escorted by Bf-109s. This is the engagement that cements his legend. In less than 2 minutes, Hofer destroys 5 aircraft and damages 2 others. He uses the snap turn to reverse on 3, pursuing 109s, simultaneously converting a defensive death trap into an offensive slaughter. He lands at the Soviet airfield at Pyryatyn with empty guns and a fever of 103 degrees. A Soviet general shakes his hand. Hofer can barely stand. He sleeps for 14 hours under Salem representative's wing, while Soviet mechanics marvel at the blistered gun ports and the warped fuselage of his Mustang. The aircraft is dying. The main spar has stress fractures that Wozniak has been tracking with a grease pencil, marking each new crack after every mission. The fuselage is twisted. The control surfaces are worn. Salem representative has been pushed beyond every limit that North American aviation ever designed into her. She is held together by rivets, welds, prayers, and the stubbornness of a crew chief who refuses to let his pilot down. But metal does not forgive. Metal remembers every G-force. Metal counts every snap. July 2nd, 1944. The group is flying from Italy back toward England with a stop for combat operations over the Balkans. Hofer's flight is assigned to strafe targets of opportunity around Mostar, Yugoslavia. The morning briefing is routine. Hit the airfield. Destroy anything on the ground. Avoid the flak towers if possible. Hofer is quiet during the briefing. He sits in the back. He does not crack jokes. He does not chew gum. Lieutenant Milliken sitting next to him notices that Hofer's flight suit is soaked with sweat, even though the briefing room is cold. "Kid, you okay? Fine. You do not look fine." Hofer turns and looks at Milliken. His eyes are glassy. "Will, do me a favor. If something happens, make sure Duke goes to someone who will walk him, not just feed him. Walk him." Milliken does not know what to say. "Nothing is going to happen, kid." Hofer smiles. It is not the reckless grin. It is something quieter. "Yeah, probably not." They take off. They fly south over the Adriatic. The sky is clear. The heat is brutal, even at altitude. Hofer's flight reaches the Mostar area and begins the strafing run. Hofer goes in first. He always goes in first. He hits the flak towers with a precision that silences 2 of them on the first pass. He destroys 3 aircraft on the ground parked Bf-109s that never get the chance to take off. Then the ones that do take off find him. A swarm of German fighters rises from the airfield. Accounts vary on the number. Some say 4. Some say 6. Hofer is alone. He has become separated from his flight during the strafing run because he made an extra pass, because he always makes an extra pass, because stopping has never been something the kid knows how to do. He fights. The radio picks up fragments of his transmissions. He calls out 1 kill. He calls out that he is engaged with multiple bandits. Then there is a long silence. Then, according to the only witness, a Yugoslav partisan watching from a hilltop, a single-engine American fighter executes a sharp rolling maneuver at very low altitude. The airplane tumbles. It does not recover. It hits the ground in a flat trajectory, sliding across a field and coming to rest in a cloud of brown dust. There is no fire. The engine is silent. The propeller is bent back. The canopy is intact. The pilot is still in the seat. The snap turn killed Ralph "Kid" Hofer at 100 feet above the ground. Whether the wing finally failed, whether the fever slowed his reflexes by the half-second margin between life and death, whether he simply ran out of altitude, nobody knows. The Mustang's wreckage was examined by partisans, but the technical details were lost in the chaos of war. What is known is that Hofer attempted the maneuver one last time in the one situation where it could not save him. Too low, too slow, too tired. The wild horse finally threw its rider. But the legacy of the maneuver he created did not die in that Yugoslav field. After the war, the concept of controlled post-stall maneuvering became one of the most studied phenomena in military aviation. The data that Colonel Cass Hough had collected from Hofer's test flights in April 1944 was preserved in the 8th Fighter Command Technical Archives. In the late 1940s, engineers at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the predecessor to NASA, began analyzing the aerodynamics of deliberate departure from controlled flight. They found that Hofer had been right about everything. The laminar flow wing's snap-stall characteristic was not a flaw. It was a feature that could be exploited if the pilot understood the energy dynamics. This understanding directly influenced the development of fighter aircraft for the next 8 decades. The F-86 Sabre that fought over Korea incorporated design lessons from the P-51's stall behavior. The Navy's Top Gun School, established in 1969, taught energy maneuverability concepts that traced their intellectual lineage directly to the principle Hofer had discovered, that speed is not just a number on a gauge, but a resource that can be traded, dumped, or weaponized. Colonel John Boyd, the legendary Air Force strategist who developed the energy maneuverability theory in the 1960s, studied World War II gun camera footage as part of his research. Boyd's theory, which revolutionized fighter design and led directly to the F-15 Eagle and the F-16 Fighting Falcon, was built on the idea that the pilot who can transition between energy states fastest will win the fight. That is the Hofer snap expressed in mathematical language. The modern Cobra maneuver, where a jet pulls its nose past vertical and effectively stops in mid-air, forcing a pursuer to overshoot, is the spiritual descendant of what a kid from Missouri did with rudder pedals and instinct in 1944. Today, aircraft like the F-22 Raptor and the Su-35 are specifically designed to operate in the post-stall regime. They have thrust vectoring nozzles that allow the pilot to control the aircraft even after the wings have stopped flying. Every time one of those jets executes a high angle of attack maneuver at an air show or in combat, the ghost of Ralph Hofer is in the cockpit. But the deepest lesson of the Hofer story is not about aerodynamics. It is about the relationship between institutions and innovation. Every military, every corporation, every system built on hierarchy faces the same dilemma. The manual exists to keep people alive. It codifies the lessons learned from the deaths of those who came before. Violating the manual is dangerous. Most of the time, the people who violate the manual die, and the manual is proven right. But occasionally, someone violates the manual and discovers something the manual did not know. The question is whether the institution can recognize the difference between recklessness and revelation. In Hofer's case, the institution almost failed. Colonel Peterson wanted the snap turn buried. The grounding orders, the psychological evaluations, the bureaucratic resistance, all of it was designed to protect the system from a threat it did not understand. It took one engineer, Colonel Cass Hough, with the curiosity to ask why instead of saying no to save the innovation from being crushed. This pattern repeats throughout history. The commanders who rejected Billy Mitchell's theories about air power, the admirals who resisted radar, the generals who dismissed the tank. In each case, the institution protected itself from change until the cost of not changing became unbearable. Hofer was lucky. He had Hough. Most innovators do not have their Hofer. Most innovators are ground down by the system, and their ideas die with them. The ones who survive, the ones whose ideas break through, they change the world. But they rarely get to see it. And there is one final detail that almost no one knows. In 2003, a team of aviation archaeologists located the crash site of Salem Representative near Mostar, Bosnia-Herzegovina. The area had been a war zone during the Yugoslav conflicts of the 1990s and was heavily mined. It took 2 years to clear the site. When they finally excavated the wreckage, they found the Mustang's data plate confirming the identity of the aircraft. They found fragments of the Merlin engine. They found the bent propeller blades. And they found something else. Welded to the junction of the main wing spar, buried under 60 years of dirt and corrosion, was a small steel brace. It was not part of the original North American aviation design. It was not in any technical order or modification bulletin. It was a custom edition, hand-welded by someone who knew that the airplane was being pushed beyond its limits and who wanted to give the pilot one more margin of safety, one more snap, one more chance. Sergeant Wozniak's brace. The crew chief who thought the kid was crazy, but who reinforced the wing anyway, because that is what you do when your pilot trusts you with his life. Hofer never knew it was there. He never knew that every time he stomped the rudder and crossed the controls at 400 miles per hour, a small piece of welded steel was standing between him and structural failure. He thought he was riding the wild horse alone. He was not. From a washout kid with a forbidden maneuver to a legacy that shaped 80 years of fighter aviation, Ralph "Kid" Hofer proved that the most dangerous weapon in the sky is not the engine or the gun or the airframe. It is the pilot who makes a mistake, survives it, and then has the audacity to ask, "What if I do that again on purpose?" Between 1944 and 1945, the snap turn and its derivatives were used by hundreds of Allied pilots across the European and Pacific theaters. The exact number of lives saved is impossible to calculate, but the 34% improvement in defensive survival rates documented by 8th Fighter Command translates to hundreds of pilots who came home because a kid from Salem, Missouri refused to fly by the book. He is buried in a quiet corner of the Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis. His headstone says nothing about the snap turn. It says nothing about the 7 aircraft destroyed in 2 minutes over Hungary. It says nothing about Normandy, or the Cobra maneuver, or the F-22 Raptor. It simply gives his name, his rank, and his dates. But if you listen carefully on a windy day, when the air moves fast across the stone, you can almost hear it. The sound of a Merlin engine screaming, the sound of rudder pedals being stomped to the floor, the sound of a young man's voice on the radio, calm and reckless and alive. "Just clearing my guns." If you know another story like this, a forgotten innovation that changed a war, share it in the comments. This is only one of hundreds of insane ideas that won World War II. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Because history is not made by the generals who follow the manual. It is made by the people who tear the page out, flip it over, and write something new on the back.